This is a community-supported legal education channel. Find out how you can support our mission at the links in the description below. Okay, so the last week or two, we've talked about this church. It's not a church, but it calls itself a church of health and healing. It's the Genesis 2 church, and they've been embroiled in this FDA complaint where the FDA sought an injunction, received the injunction in the form of a temporary restraining order and then a preliminary injunction, preventing the Genesis 2 church from selling MMS, a bleach-like solution that it's sort of like that microdosing or what is it? Homeopathy. It's kind of like homeopathy. You dilute this bleach-like substance. I think it might actually be bleach in water, but it's so diluted that it doesn't do as much damage to you as it would normally do if you were to drink it pure or something. By the way, don't drink bleach or any homeopathic bleach or anything like that at all. It's not actually going to help you. It does not work the way these are non-scientists. These are not healthcare professionals. These are not doctors. These are quacks. And they're going to reveal what kind of quacks they are to you right here, because they have responded to the FDA's charges, both here in document 29. Oh, and here's document 28. We're going to start with document 28. This is what they responded with on May 1st after the judge had told them that they could be held in contempt. Dear Judge Williams, U.S. Attorneys Feely, Goldstein, and others, I wrote the following letter to all of you and to President Trump, Attorney General Barr, Assistant Attorney General Eric Dreiband, Civil Rights Division, as well as being sent to every media outlet that wants a statement from us and the American people, our jury, and we submitted it to God, our judge. We ask peaceably, logically, and in the name of the Lord to dismiss immediately the case in TRO against the Genesis 2 church. We ask, so please dismiss our case. Please dismiss our case. Completely stop this unconstitutional harassment of the G2 church from this day, May 1st forward. If you continue to pursue this unlawful case, then we leave you all to the judgment of the good people of the U.S. and God. Today, in the U.S., religious freedom is being attacked by the FDA, FTC, U.S. attorneys, and a federal judge. This is another one of those scenarios where, like, if you can't use your words, then I already don't believe you have a good case. So, we have to use these massive fonts and weird formatting because we don't know how to use our words. Is this gross negligence or a treasonous act or both or neither? Is the U.S. Constitution still valid today? Yes. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked bereath rule, the people mourn. First of all, I want all to know that I am praying for the following people to have their eyes opened, I thought he was going to say something else about their eyes, and repent from their unlawful ways. FDA employees, U.S. attorneys, and the judge. U.S. Constitution, Article 6 declares that the Constitution is a supreme law of the land and reinforces the requirement that judges are bound to it. This Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, and anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. Judges are bound by the U.S. Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. No debate. No takesies, backsies, no debate. My word is God. Today we have a U.S. federal judge, Kathleen Williams, violating the First Amendment with gross negligence. Gross negligence is a tort. It is not a constitutional thing. By allowing our church sacraments to be labeled as a drug. This is very offensive to us as a church and should be to all religions in the U.S. and the world. The code below was the basis of the warning we received by the FDA in early April 2020 and became the false premise for the U.S. attorneys to build a case against the church. MMS is a drug under the FDCA. The definition of drug includes articles intended for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease in man, which they were saying it could cure the coronavirus, so isn't that saying it's a cure? Attorneys Feely and Goldstein unconstitutionally and unlawfully submitted a complaint for preliminary and permanent injunction to Williams. We saw that. And they want to supply those who need it and who want it for a donation. To keep the peace, we at the G2 Church voluntarily and under duress have stopped the sending of our G2A sacraments since April 17th to pray and ask the Lord how we should respond. I don't think they stopped it. I think the U.S. attorneys had an investigator call, and the investigator said, hey, how can I get a hold of this? And they told him how to get a hold of it, which doesn't seem to me to be in at least the good faith of the order. It might actually be against the text of the order. This action in no way is evidence that we are submitting to this order. We completely reject this temporary restraining order on the grounds that it is violating out First Amendment rights to freely exercise our religious beliefs. During this time, Attorney General Barr sent out the following memorandum. I am directing each of the U.S. attorneys to also be on the lookout for state and local directives that could be violating the constitutional rights and civil liberties of individual citizens. As the Department of Justice explained recently in guidance to states and localities taking steps to battle the pandemic, even in times of emergency, when reasonable and temporary restrictions are placed on rights, the First Amendment and federal statutory law prohibit discrimination against religious institutions and religious believers. They're not, the thing is though, they're not discriminating against this religious institution. What would discrimination against this purported religious institution, I don't think it's actually religious, but purported religious institution, what would actual discrimination look like under these circumstances? It would look like, well, the church can't sell MMS, but somebody else can. So if the church is not permitted and somebody else or some other group of people or category of persons are permitted to sell it without this oversight by the FDA, without being subject to these laws, yeah, that's some kind of unconstitutional discrimination. That's some kind of discrimination against the religious liberty of the church, especially if the discrimination is expressly against the religious nature of the church as opposed to just some regulation that applies to everybody. And that's why this is not religious discrimination, because this is a health and safety regulation, not just because of the virus situation, but in general. It was just discovered because they were claiming to cure the virus. So this is not discrimination because they are telling everyone you can't sell this bleach cure without FDA approval or without being within the FDA's guidelines, which who could sell bleach as an FDA approved coronavirus cure? You can't. So that's why it's not religious discrimination.
And the government is allowed to put certain limits on your, say, religious expression or something, as long as it meets, for example, strict scrutiny. So it has to show a compelling interest. So it has to show that if they didn't put this limit in place, really bad things would happen. And I think that they have met that criteria here in saying that people could be really harmed by this and that they have a prerogative to stop people from representing ineffective things as effective drugs.
They say, so by categorizing our sacraments as a drug, the FDA was allowed, by the help of the oath-breaking U.S. attorneys, to obtain a completely unlawful and unconstitutional restraining order that has caused considerable hardship on many of our members and followers. Wow. So preventing you from selling unapproved bleach products as a miracle cure, what I would call snake oil, you are suffering a considerable hardship. How much of the sales of this thing was all of your income? Because there is no justice among these constitutional First Amendment violators, we at Genesis 2 Church of Health and Healing are rejecting this order as not applicable to us as a constitutional protected religion with sacraments that we have been practicing also. The First Amendment clearly states Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. No law, code, statute, or order can be made against the free exercise of a church's sacraments, which is what the First Amendment says clearly. How can there be an order for a church to stop their sacramental practices? There cannot be one. You see, these people that conspired together to stop the church from practicing our sacraments is completely violating the First Amendment in a gross, negligent way, to say the least. Guys, okay, some terminology. Gross negligence is when you knew or should have known of a duty of care, and then you breached that duty of care, causing an injury. That's gross negligence. This is a direct action. There is no gross negligence at all. This is an intentional act. This is an intentional tort if it is a tort. It's not a tort. It's the application of a regulation within the prosecutorial discretion of an executive branch agency. That's their job. Like, that's exactly what an executive branch agency is supposed to do. So it's completely intentional. You don't have to keep accusing them of gross negligence. You accuse them of an intentionally bad practice. Many have heard it said, your actions speak louder than your words. That's a level of self-awareness, huh? This is even mentioned in the Bible, my little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth. By the actions of a few U.S. attorneys and one federal judge, we have had our religious rights completely and openly violated. These individuals have oaths to obey the Constitution. I, U.S. attorney, do solemnly swear or affirm that as an attorney and counselor of this court, I will conduct myself uprightly and according to law, and that I will support the Constitution of the United States. I do solemnly swear that I will administer justice without respect to persons, and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a such and such person under the Constitution and laws of the United States. So help me God. Has this oath been violated by Mr. Feely and Mr. Goldstein and the other U.S. attorneys involved? They need to be removed, ? Each justice or judge in the United States shall take the following oath of office, which says the same thing and ends in so help me God. Has Judge Williams violated her oath? ? She need to be removed? ? I mean, seriously, Charlie Kelly is writing all this, right? An oath is defined in Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary as a solemn affirmation or declaration made with an appeal to God for the truth of what is affirmed. The appeal to God in an oath implies that the person implicates his vengeance and renounces his favor if the declaration is false, or if the declaration is a promise, the person invokes the vengeance of God if he should fail to fulfill it. A false oath is called perjury. The requirement to agree under oath and to uphold the Constitution is an unequivocal requirement to holding office. The primary purpose of our Constitution is to protect the people in their God-given unalienable rights. I don't think so. I think the freedom of religion applies to everyone. So I'm also protected by the Constitution, and my freedom to question God or question my belief in God or question religion or question if there's any God is also my unalienable right. It's actually inalienable is the phrase, inalienable right. The value of a written constitution is beyond measure. Words have meaning. Those meanings may be known. They are not open to arbitrary or unilateral interpretation. Again, a self-awareness moment. Or redefinition by those who would modify the Constitution to meet their whims. I mean, come on, this is like self-awareness central here. The words and the intended scope of the government was clearly established by those who framed the Constitution. There was an establishment and constitutional method for modifying the Constitution, the amendments, etc. Until it is modified legally, the United States Constitution is obligatory upon all. Gross negligence means that defendant's conduct was so reckless or wanting in care that it constituted a conscious disregard or indifference to the life, safety, or rights of persons who are exposed to such conduct. The Constitution and the laws and treaties of the United States shall be made in pursuance thereof. When a judge acts intentionally and knowingly to deprive a person of his constitutional rights, he exercises no discretion or individual judgment. He acts no longer as a judge, but as a minister of his own prejudices. A judge is liable for injury caused by a ministerial act. To have immunity, the judge must be performing a judicial function. What do you think that issuing a TRO and restraining order and all that because of a violation of the Food and Drug Act, what do you think that is? That is a judge performing a judicial function. The presence of malice and the intention to deprive a person of his civil rights is wholly incompatible. So now they get into section 1983, which actually is not that. It is section 1983, where they are citing here. Every person or state under color of statute who causes to be subjected within the jurisdiction to any person, deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunity shall be liable at an action in law. And so that is their first response. There's actually a second one of these. Then when the judge told them they had to respond by May 5th or 6th to the contempt sanctions, they wrote again, this time in color. And what I've had to do is redact some of this out because they're going to show some graphic injuries that they say were then cured by this bleach cure. Now, keep in mind that a broken clock is right twice a day. So if you administer a cure to people and then some of them get better, and then all you cite are the people who got better, and then you can claim that your cure worked. But then if you don't include the parts where people still died or their injuries got worse, then that sort of selective choosing of your statistics belies the honesty and correlations and findings in your statistics, doesn't it, Tech?
Oh, yeah. The research nerd part of me is very much like, oh, you need the double-blind control study, where you have two groups, where you have the control group that gets the placebo, and then it has to do better than the placebo, and you have to track your side effects, because if you administer a drug and yes, more people get better, but also more people die, then that doesn't count.
Yeah, that doesn't count. And so they write, we have to obey God rather than men. We will not be participating in any of your unconstitutional orders, summons, etc., due to your willful denial of the First Amendment and God's word. We have to reject these due to the fact that the FDA, FTC categorized our sacraments unlawfully as a drug, which we have been practicing since 2010. 2010. They've been doing this for a decade, selling bleach as a, what do we call it again? Not an essential oil, as a homeopathic cure. And now they're doing it for the coronavirus, the COVID-19 epidemic. Our church sacraments bring health to so many that we are committed to God to help healing as many as come to us for help as he commanded. Again and again, I have written you all that according to the First Amendment and God's word, you have no authority over our church and its practices, no matter how you try to invent reason to stop us from helping our members and followers. We have the right to choose whatever we decide to put in our temples, our bodies, without any government consent needed. And yes, the government probably cannot prevent you from going to the store, buying a bottle of bleach, and ingesting it. The police and the ambulance and the fire will still try to help you while you're dying, but the government can't stop you from doing that. So how can the government stop the church from selling it to people? Because that is where the government gets its power. The government can stop individual people from doing it to others. From selling it, in this case through interstate commerce, is where the FDA gets their authority. You seem not to understand us. You need to understand us and respect our God-given rights. You, U.S. attorneys and judge, seem to forget your oath to the U.S. Constitution, which, by the way, the oath says nothing about not stopping miracle cures that are false and damaging from being regulated under food and drug law. The people of the United States and the world are on our side because they understand freedom of choice that God has given us. So I do not think the people of the United States are on your side. I'm pretty sure if there was a survey, it would be like 66 to 33. I'm pretty sure it would be in favor of the government, 66 to 33. Yes, that does mean that 33% of the people are a little nuts, if that was the statistic. It's not the statistic. It's just something I made up in my head. But that's my feeling, since that appears to be the divide that's in the country right now, is about that 2/3 against 1/3. How can we not help people when we see thousands of people being helped outside of the medical industry with our church sacraments? You know, there are things like studies, like Tack just said, there are double-blind studies you could do. Watch how they cite to absolutely nothing like that. Instead, they give you pictures of eczema being cured, of gangrene being cured, but no context. Is there anybody here vouching under penalty of perjury? Is there a testimony via the victim or a witness who saw this being cured? No, they just pictures of someone who purportedly got better, and then it has to have been the MMS miracle cure. Cancer got cured. Man dying of AIDS was cured. This apparently they flipped I don't know why would they flip the image. No idea. Skin cancer got cured. An autoimmune disease got cured. I blurred these out because they might violate some YouTube policy on medical graphical imagery or something. So here's a cat's tumor cured. Here's prostate cancer cured. Here is meningitis, and here is some kind of animal spider bite. A spider bite cured, meningitis cured. We have thousands in the US worldwide sending in testimonies. That's scary. So if they say there's thousands using their product, did they just admit that they've sold it thousands of times? The evidence is clear that the FDA, CDC, and DOJ are not telling us we cannot use our sacraments while God tells us to go forth and heal. We have a mandate from God. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out the devils. Freely ye have received, freely give. But that doesn't say anything about ignoring all the scientific and medical discoveries and understanding that we have these days. We ought to obey God rather than men. I mean, where is the chemical composition of bleach in the Bible? I'd like to see that. Please show us where God has revealed the chemical composition of bleach and how you're supposed to use it to help cure people.
Also, for a second, let's just pretend that this is a miracle cure. Let's pretend that they discovered the new form of antibiotics and it's good for everything. Then do a clinical trial.
Yeah, if it's so great,
prove it.
Why does it have to be so shady? Why does it have to be so underhanded? Follow the, this is like those studies that try to reveal that prayer has the power to heal, and then when they actually do a double-blind study, they find out that prayer doesn't have much to do with it. Positive attitudes have something to do with it. Personal mental attention, like mindfulness, which is basically similar to praying, but in praying, you might be picturing a higher power or God that you're talking to, whereas in mindfulness, you're trying to focus on your own personal mental state and well-being. But you might still be doing some of the same self-reflection, although in the Buddhist version of mindfulness, you're trying to empty your mind or clear your mind, not keep it awash in thoughts. Prayer might be awash in thoughts, but they overlap a little bit. So the positive influences of proper mental health practices, yes, might be correlated with an improved health and well-being, even physical health and well-being. But just praying for people has been shown, 1 million prayers across the United States has about the same effect as 1 million likes on Facebook. Somebody might see it and smile and be a little bit happier that people are paying attention to their situation. But it doesn't mean that God is going to cure you. It's more of a positive mental state. If there was a correlation between MMS or prayer and curing things, then it could easily be studied and confirmed, and we would have these miracle cures and prayer remedies for these things. And we don't, not because there's some massive conspiracy. This church can go and do their studies and show it to the FDA and get FDA approval and submit it to this. They can do all of that. They just don't. They don't because it doesn't work that way. And they know it too. They know they're selling snake oil. They're trying to hide behind the First Amendment and religious freedom so they can continue making money. As they said in the court filing, it's not really a church. They're just saying they're a church so they can try to get away with making religious messages, asking for religious donations, being tax exempt, and hiding behind the protections of the First Amendment. This is an insult to real churches everywhere. Real religion, genuine, sincere religion deals with the origin of man, our purpose, where we came from, where we're going, why we're here, the unanswerable questions. As the questions become answerable by science, you don't need a religious answer to 2 + 2 = 4. You need a religious answer to, why am I here? And there are many valid answers to that. In fact, pretty much any answer is valid because the question doesn't have an answer. So we can't invalidate it by finding the correct answer and then coming back and saying you're wrong or you're right. I personally believe that there is no one sentient God controlling everything, but more that we, beings, sentient beings, are becoming sentient and collectively are becoming conscious of our existence. And the universe is then collectively, very slowly, becoming conscious of its existence. And so that's my personal interpretation of it. I'm not right. I'm not wrong. It's a religious interpretation of things. You can't say that God has definitively told you to sell bleach to people. That's not a religious interpretation of anything. Here is a story about what happened to Peter and John in the early church. A man was healed. It caused an uproar. The religious leaders and officials didn't like it and threatened Peter and John with jail. Read the story in the Bible. It's in the book of Acts. Geez, people, how do you not know this? How, Judge, do you not know your religious stories? And how do you not comport yourself and the law to those religious stories in a 2,000-year-old book that doesn't know what we know today, and we don't even really know who the people were that wrote it? But I'm getting off topic. Maybe you will see a similar thing happen to the Genesis 2 church today. So then they cite to a bunch of Bible verses. By what power have ye done this? The good deed done by the important men, beholding the man which was healed standing with them. So they're telling all the healing stories of the Bible. We ought to obey God rather than men. The Magna Carta wasn't until 1216 or something like that. We made the laws of men over the last 2,000 years. I'm sure there were laws of men before then, but we finally recorded them and preserved them. And we have not done that otherwise. The Bible is not a recording of law. It's a recording of the stories people told back then. And I personally believe that the Christian Bible was also kind of a marketing effort to redefine some of the religious practices of the day into a new religion. And it was very successful. It's an ubiquitous religion around the world, and especially in the United States 2,000 years later. So in that sense, it was successful. But I do not believe it was a statement of the law of men, and I do not believe that the First Amendment protects anything. So if you want to have human sacrifices, is that protected by the First Amendment Religious Freedom Clause? I don't think so. If you want to have underage people doing things underage people are not supposed to be victims of, then that would be a religious practice that could be protected under the First Amendment. I don't think so. So no, it does not work that way. The way that it works is what we call constitutional strict scrutiny. The government, the federal government, the state governments are allowed to make laws that infringe or restrict your religious liberty so long as the law is narrowly tailored to effect, E-F-F-E-C-T, a compelling government interest. So the government interest needs to be really compelling, like health and safety, like preventing the spread of miracle cures that aren't actually miracle cures. It has to be narrowly tailored. So the law has to do only what it needs to do to make that compelling interest effective, to put regulations into effect that only enact that compelling interest. So narrowly tailored means we're only going to regulate food and drug. We're only going to regulate the labeling of food and drug only under certain circumstances. And yes, it applies to everybody and not just to non-religious institutions. Otherwise, religious institutions could sell whatever they wanted. I mean, there's some truly egregious things you can come up with here that would be protected under the First Amendment if this applied. So this is a true slippery slope. If the Genesis 2 church had their way here, then every church, nay, every person would be able to say, I don't have to pay my taxes because it's against my religious beliefs. I don't have to avoid murdering people because it's my religious belief. I don't have to drive on the right side of the road because it's my religious belief. It would be utter chaos as everybody did whatever they wanted and cited religious practices for it. That's how ridiculous this is. But they continue. This is almost over. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And we will obey God rather than men. We cannot speak the things which we have seen or heard. What? In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Messiah of the world, Emmanuel. Because, saying Jesus' name a whole bunch of times, that makes things more effective, right? I was religious for 23. I was deeply, deeply religious for 23 years, totally sold on all of the religious stuff. So I have maybe a little bit of militancy against it when I see it being used this way. This is exactly the kind of stuff that made me wonder whether God existed or not, if it could be used for such non-religious purposes, basically. So that's the problem that I have with this kind of thing, is this is not religious. It makes people who have genuinely held sincere religious beliefs look like quacks, because this is quackery right here. Absolute quackery. What do you think of the Genesis 2 Church's response? All right, so tell us what you think of that. I think that's utter quackery and entertaining, but also scary as heck that those people are selling those things to other people, and it's probably actually harming them, not helping them. If there is some benefit to imbibing a diluted bleach solution, they can show it and prove it to the FDA before they sell it to people, and then sell it as either a non-drug that doesn't need to be labeled and regulated, or as a drug, since it contains drug items. It does. I mean, it contains chemicals that act as drugs. So, yeah, I really don't see how they have a leg to stand on. So let me know what you think. Part of me wonders if maybe they do. I wonder if people actually do take it, but it's calculated to be so homeopathic, so diluted that so they are diluted, and then it's diluted in water. And I'm wondering if it's just so diluted in water that it actually doesn't cause much, if any, harm. Your body gets burned by the bleach just a tiny bit inside, and then it's diluted to the point where it can't do any more harm, and then your body passes it. But in the meantime, you slightly burned your stomach lining or something. I'm hoping that it's only something that is so diluted it doesn't do too much damage for their own sake. But geez, this stuff is nuts. I kind of hope that these people keep up this retaliation, like their response in retaliation to the government's alleged retaliation. I'm hoping that they keep it up and they learn what the judge's sanctions really can do. The judge can throw them in jail until they comply. So that is our show, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'm Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney, and this is our legal education and legal news channel, Lawful Masses. Support us on patreon.com/ljfrench and sponsus.com/law if you are able. It really helps our channel out and makes it possible to make these videos at all in the first place. Thank you very much to our $50 plus supporters in the month of May. I love how long this list is. Joe Tyson, Wes Delj, Nicely Done Defense, Video Remonetized, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Eevi, Kyle Mudrak, Spirit Bear, Negrey, Michael Pearce, Daniel Perez, Blackleaf, Benjamin Hitov, Stephen, Ottah, Cute Grills in Your Area, Longreach Jones, Zachary, Chaney, Mullen PC, Ugly Grill, Shielo T, Josh Baker, Gregory, and Rudolph Bescherer Jr. And the $5 plus supporters are scrolling on the LED matrix panel next to me. I am Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. I will see you in the videos that drop. I love you all. Stay safe, stay healthy. We're going to get out of this whole thing together safely. Bye.